Welcome, my name is Jeff Bartels. I'm an infrastructure technical specialist at Autodesk, and today we're going to be looking at how we can add intelligence to an InfraWorks model by editing the schema. Just a quick heads up, I am working out of my home office today, and I've got my dogs working with me. They're hanging out down here as well. Let's see if I can push that forward. There we go. I just took that picture a couple minutes ago. That's Margaret in the front and Walter in the back. They're just going down for their morning nap, so I don't anticipate any problems. But in the event you hear a little ambient noise in the background, it could be them milling about. So, a little bit about myself. I have been working in the civil infrastructure industry for more than 20 years. I have been training Autodesk applications for a long time. I also contribute to a blog called Civil Immersion. I've got the URL there on screen. This is a blog that myself and a couple other technical specialists put together for the sole purpose of creating how-to videos to help customers take advantage of the many tools in the AEC collection. In fact, if I click this, I think it'll take me to that website. Yes, it will. There we go. So over the past couple of years, we have created hundreds of these how-to recordings, 6 to 8 minutes, just to show you how you can get in and take advantage of several of those AEC collection tools, even if you've never touched it before. Watching one of these videos, you can learn workflows that you can take advantage of today. So if you have access to the collection, that can be a great resource to look into. The agenda for today's session, we're going to start by looking at the current InfraWorks schema and how, it can be a little bit challenging if you're incorporating geospatial data that has a lot of attribution. We'll also look at now with the advent of InfraWorks 2020, we can now create our own custom feature classes and attribution. So this allows us to overcome that limitation of, earlier we didn't have an editable schema. Now we can edit it. So we're going to look at how we can do that. We'll also, after we create a custom feature class, we will import some geospatial data into that feature class. We will then look at how, once we have this additional attribution in the model, how can we take advantage of it? We'll look at some ways we can leverage that information. We'll also look at how we can create brand new objects within InfraWorks that are based on a custom feature class. We will then wrap up with a summary, and we'll address any questions. This is going to be a PowerPoint-free zone. Not a big fan of PowerPoint, so rather than showing bullet points and screenshots, we're going to be working live in the software. And I always like to say that whenever you work live, it can be both an exciting and a frightening time because no two presentations are exactly the same. With that, we're going to jump right into the live demonstration here. Let me take this down, and I'll close up some of these things. I'm starting out here in InfraWorks, and I'm going to open a model. I've got one here I created earlier called Schema Demo. This is a model that I put together from Model Builder. This is a neighborhood in Littleton, Colorado. If I orbit around here, you can see some of the information we got from Model Builder. I've got the aerial photo there. We can see the relief from the USGS data. It also included several of the streets, and you can see a handful of buildings are in this model that came from Model Builder. At this point, I would like to add some geospatial data to help me identify where the property lines are. I have a shape file that I can use for that, so I'm going to go to the Data Sources panel here, and then I'll open this menu on the left, and I'll choose that I'd like to add a shapefile. I will then point to my dataset folder here, and I'll select this shapefile called Parcels, and I'll click Open. We can see that that has been attached. Now at this point, InfraWorks doesn't know what that data represents, so I'm going to double-click to configure this. And then the very first thing we'll do is select a type. This represents the feature class that this data represents. So you can see in the list here the number of feature classes that we get out of the box with InfraWorks. Since these parcels are going to be draped on the surface, I'm going to choose coverage areas. And then once I choose that type, I can then select a style for that. I'm going to select a style I created a little earlier called Parcel Boundaries. I will then click OK, and I'll choose Close and Refresh. And I can see that that is now showing up underneath the coverage areas feature class. And if we zoom in on the model, I can see all of those lot lines draped on the surface. So this is a great thing, from a geometric perspective. It gives me a good idea of where those lot lines are. That being said, that shapefile may have attribution that I'd also like to take advantage of in this model. Here's my challenge. If I double-click to configure this connection, The tabs that we see here represent the InfraWorks schema for a coverage area. And depending on the amount of attributes that you have, you may not have enough slots to accommodate those attributes. You can see I have one here called name. And if I open this menu to the right, you can see the attributes that are tied to that shape file. Since these are parcels, I've got an attribute that holds the address, one that holds the classification, neighborhood. I have appraised value. Now this is a sample data set, so if this was a real parcel file, you may also have things like owner, parcel index number, taxable ID, library district, political affiliation. You can have just about anything in there. The problem is if you have, 20 or 30 attributes, where do you, plug these into the InfraWorks schema? As an example, I could maybe put the classification in here as the name, maybe for the description. Maybe I could put the address. If I go to the table tab here, you can see that there's another generic item called user data. I could maybe map one of those attributes here if I wanted to. But if I had a lot of them, that's where we have that challenge. How can I get all of that information in my model? So I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to remove this connection. I'll do that by right-clicking on it, and I'll choose Remove. And we will create a custom feature class that allows us to accommodate all of that additional attribution. I can do that here in the Model panel. I'm going to open the Model Explorer. Here we can see all of the feature classes. I'm going to come down to Coverage Areas, and I will right-click on this, and from here I'll choose Add Extend Schema. This brings up the Extend Schema Tool. And on the left, we can see a listing of all the feature classes. If I select these, you can see the database name. You can see the display name. That's the name that shows up in the application. You can also see the category. That is where this falls over here in the Model Explorer. So if I select City Furniture, for instance, you can see the category's Furniture. There is City Furniture there underneath that category. So I should mention that you cannot edit the existing classes. I can't just add attributes to coverage areas, but I can create a subclass or a feature class that's based on an existing one. So let me do that. I'm going to click the Add button here. I'm creating a new feature class based on coverage areas. For the feature class name, I'm going to call this Parcel Lines. And as I type this, you can see a warning pops up. You have to follow some rules when you create the names. This is the name that the database is looking at. If I hover over this warning, it'll tell me some of the things that are not allowed. In this case, it does not like that space, so I'm going to put an underscore in there. Now I can give this a display name. Here I can be a little more formal. I can just type Parcel Lines. That's what's going to show up in the application. Important to note, when you create your own custom feature classes, do not replicate any of the feature classes that exist already. I could very easily here have created a feature class called Parcels, but then I already have one of those. It will let you create a duplicate, and that can create some confusion because now you have two, and it could be hard to tell which is which. So keep that in mind. So I've got my new feature class. The category's fine. At this point, I can start creating my own attributes. And to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to minimize the application a little bit. And I have created a text file that shows basically the same attributes that we just saw. I'm going to replicate these in my new feature class so I can plug those in. I can click the Add button to create an attribute, and we'll start with this one representing the classification. So the database name will be PUC. The display name, I'm going to make it the same thing. If I open the type entry here, you can see the different types. This represents how the attribute is going to be stored. If it's going to be Boolean, things like yes, no, whether it's a date, whether it's double, this would be a number with a decimal. Integer would be whole numbers, and then string would be text. So since it's a classification, I'm going to make that a string, and then I'll click Add. And since I'm lazy, I am just going to copy these. I've got one here that represents the neighborhood. I am going to be a little more formal here. I'll just type neighborhood for the display name. And for type, we'll make that a string. I will then do appraised value. I'll just paste that for both. And appraised value, I'm going to choose integer in this case. I doubt the appraised values are going to be to the decimal space. And then the last one, we'll do the address. I'll copy this and I'll create a new attribute. We'll paste that, and then I'm going to be a little more formal with the display name. I'll just type address, and we'll make this a string. So I have created a new feature class, which is essentially identical to coverage areas with respect to its schema. Only difference is I have added these additional attributes, and I could add as many as I want. Let's come down and click Apply Schema. It's important to note that when you are editing the InfraWorks schema, there is no undo. So as soon as I click Apply, it's saying, hey, you know what, make sure that everything is spelled correctly, that you chose the appropriate types for your attributes, because once you make this change, it's not an undoable action. So in this case, everything's good. I'm going to click Yes. And InfraWorks will close the model and then reopen it using that new schema. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this on screen. So now that the schema has been updated, let's bring that same shapefile in again. I'm going to go back to Data Sources, and we'll open this menu on the left, and I'll come down and choose Shape. I'll select that Bartels file, and I'll click Open. Once it's connected, I will double-click to configure it, and now type. What feature class will I choose? I'm going to choose that new feature class that I just made. Since it's based on coverages, I can select a coverage style here. And then I'm going to go to the Table tab. If I drag this down to the bottom, here's where we'll find the extended attributes that I created. So very easy now. I can simply plug the attributes coming along from the shapefile into the attributes here in the schema. So for the address, we'll take the address attributes. For the classification, we'll map that one. We will then map the neighborhood to the neighborhood value, and then we'll do the appraised value. When I'm finished, I'll choose Close and Refresh. So now, in addition to having that geometry, I also have access to all of that rich attribution. As an example, if I select a lot and come over to Properties, we can see the extended attribution down here. And these are editable values. If I wanted to change these, I could. So all of that information is now part of my model. It's important to note that I'm doing this with parcels, but you can do this with any of the objects in InfraWorks. So now that we have that information, let's look at some ways that we can take advantage of it. As an example, maybe I would like that if I was to hover over a lot, I could see its address. I'll do that by creating a tooltip. I'm going to double-click on that connection. You can see it's now stored under the new feature class. Let me double-click on that connection, and I'll go to Tooltip, and then I'll choose HTML. I will then open the Property menu, and which property do I want to display in the tooltip? I'll choose the address. Let's click OK. Oops, let's do that again. I'll choose the address. Perfect. When I choose Close and Refresh, it reprocesses the data, and now if I hover over one of these lots, I can see the address. Now in this case, I'm only displaying one attribute. I could display as many attributes as I want. Let's back up. We'll take it a little bit further. Maybe I would like to colorize these lots based on their classification. To do that, I could do a feature theme. In the display panel here, I'll open Feature Themes, and I'll click to create a new theme. We'll call this theme Lot Classifications. What feature class do I want to theme? I'll grab that new feature class that I just made. The property is going to be PUC, that represents the classification. Here we can see the minimum and maximum values. I don't think there's too many classifications in this case, so for distribution, rather than quantile, I'm going to choose individual values. Yeah, and you can see there's just 9 of them there. That's not too bad, so I'll have 9 different colors. When I click OK, we can see those lots are colorized, and I get a nice legend over here to the right. So since I have that attribution in the model, I can make that visual. So it's very easy to see that this lot is likely a church. I can see based on the legend, it's religious purposes, and we can see that here in the attribution. Let me press Escape. If I pan the model over, notice I have a lot here that's red, which represents there is no entry for the classification. And in fact, if I double click on that or select it, I can see that there is no attribute there for that. So since the information is here, I can take advantage of that within the InfraWorks environment. Let's do this. I'll close that, and we'll take it one more step. Maybe I would like to query this data. Maybe I would like to identify all lots that are of a particular neighborhood. I'm going to select a lot here, and for its neighborhood value, we can see that's Ridgewood sub 2nd FLG. I'm going to Control-C to copy that to my clipboard. And let's look at how we can query this data. I can do that by going to the Model Explorer, and we'll come down under the feature classes. Right here, I can find that parcel lines class that I made. To the right of the feature name, you'll find a series of icons. This lock, if I click that, will lock the data such that it's not selectable. This can be a great tool in the event you have a lot of things in your model and you want to make it easier to select some things and, not so easy to select others. Now that that's locked, I can't physically select these boundaries. That said, the tooltips will still work. So let me unlock that. The button to the right is a highlight button. If I click that, it will highlight the entire feature class. We can see that on screen. Let me click to turn that off. Now, instead of highlighting the entire feature class, I just like to highlight the lots that conform to that one neighborhood. I can do that by clicking this funnel. This allows me to create a filter or a query. It will generate a subset of the overall feature class. And you can be as simple or as complex with this as you want. In this case, I'm just going to go to the extended attributes and say I want all lots having this attribute. I'll double click neighborhood. So all lots whose neighborhood attribute equals, and then I can come over here if I want to see what the individual properties are, or the individual values associated with that attribute. Let's double click on neighborhood. Here they are. I'll double click on this Ridgewood sub 2nd FLG. So basically create a subset for all lots whose neighborhood equals this. I can then click OK. We can see those highlighted on screen. You can see the subset was created here. And if I double click on that, I can hit Control-V, and we could just paste that neighborhood name as the name of the subset. Let me press Escape here to deselect. So now, if I click the highlight button for the subset, I am showing just lots that conform to my query. In fact, we don't have to stick with the purple highlight. If I right-click on that highlight, I can choose a different color. Maybe we could make this yellow as an example. You can see the difference there on screen. Let me turn that off. Let's take it one more step. I can theme a subset. Maybe I would like to visualize the lots in that neighborhood based on their property value. To do that, I will create another feature theme. I'll come up to Theme. We'll create a new one. Name, we'll call this Ridgewood Lot Values. For the feature class, notice that the subsets show up in here as their own feature class. For property, I'm going to choose the appraised value. I'd like to theme them by that value. And here you can see the minimum and maximum values. Since there are going to be a lot of unique values here, I'll just leave this set to quantile. So there'll be 6 categories or 6 colors. And if I click OK, I can now see those lots are colorized, and based on what we were looking for, the highest value lots are here to the north. And I can see that the lowest value lots are located right in this area. And once again, I am just doing this with parcels, but you can do this with anything. Just imagine if you brought in surveyed trees for an existing conditions model. You could say, show me all oak trees having a 6-inch diameter or less. Just a ton of options that you have. Just imagine some of the possibilities you could have with your InfraWorks model if you had access to unlimited attribution. Let's turn this off, and we'll look at a way that we can create a brand new object based on an existing feature class, or based on a custom feature class. If I wanted to create a new parcel, in InfraWorks, when we create things, we go to the Create tab. And from here, we can create a new road or barrier or bridge, tunnel, building. I'm going to come down and choose coverage. That's what this feature class was based on. So I'd like to create a new coverage, and then I will select a style. Now, before I draw this coverage on screen, I will right-click. And from here, it will allow me to select any feature class that is based on the coverage area. So I'm going to choose parcel lines. And right here, we can see the feature is switched. Now, as I create my geometry, I'll double-click when I'm finished. That generates a brand new lot that conforms to that feature class, and it gives me the ability to plug in or add those additional attribute values if I want to. So not only can we create a feature class that we can tie to geospatial data, but we could create a feature class that we could use to create brand new objects within the InfraWorks model. So just a ton of possibilities, just allowing us to create customizations and be able to leverage a lot more data within our InfraWorks model by creating the custom feature classes and editing that schema. Knowing that, let me come back out to this. We'll do a quick summary here. During the presentation today, we looked at the current InfraWorks schema and some of the challenges you may have if you have a lot of attribution. We looked at now with InfraWorks 2020, we now have the ability to create our own custom feature classes and attribution in the event we want to leverage all that rich data within our model. We saw that once we create the custom feature classes, it's very easy to plug geospatial data into those classes. We saw some of the ways we could take advantage of that attribution, whether it be via a tooltip or a feature theme or a subset or a combination of those things. We also saw that once a new feature class is created, it's very easy to create brand new objects based on that custom feature class. At this point, we can open the floor and address any questions that you may have.